This Saturday, the chosen one, God is asking you for one thing before the turn begins. Obey what you already understand. You may have been waiting for a louder sign, a perfect explanation, or a sudden feeling that removes every question, while a quieter instruction has remained in front of you. Perhaps it is the conversation you must stop forcing, the habit you must release, the apology you must make, the boundary you must honor, or the faithful task you keep postponing. Your chest tightens because you know that obedience will cost comfort before it produces clarity. The difficult part is not always hearing God. Sometimes it is accepting that the next step is already plain. This Saturday is not presented as a guaranteed date for a supernatural event, but as a solemn marker for reflection, recognition, and renewed obedience. Something in you has been asking, "What am I supposed to do now?" And the answer may begin with the instruction you have been negotiating with. If you feel that a season has been repeating and you cannot name what it is forming, the 7 principles of C.S. Lewis for the chosen can help you examine that season with greater clarity, faith, and honesty. It is written for the moment when waiting feels confusing, change feels near, and you need to distinguish spiritual direction from emotional pressure. You can use its perspective to recognize what your heart may be learning and what response is actually yours to make. To access the ebook, go now to the top of the comments and click the link in the pinned comment. Now return to this moment, because the obedience being asked of you may be smaller, more practical, and more immediate than the dramatic answer you expected. The room around you has not changed, but the way you stand inside it can change when you stop demanding certainty before taking the next faithful step. You may notice this message physically before you understand it spiritually. Your shoulders rise when you think about the decision. Your hand reaches for the phone, then pauses above a name you know you should not contact in desperation. Your eyes move across the same unfinished task while your mind rehearses every possible consequence. In the bedroom before sunrise, the air is cool, the curtains are still, and the silence seems to hold the question you have carried through several ordinary days. You rise, make coffee, and continue functioning, but something inside you remains stationed at the same threshold. You are answering people, finishing work, washing dishes, and smiling when necessary, yet your spirit keeps returning to the same point. "I know what I need to do," you whisper, and then you explain why today is not the right day. That explanation may sound reasonable, but repeated delay can reveal that the issue is not lack of information. It may be fear of what obedience will rearrange. The instruction before the turn is not necessarily an instruction to make a public announcement, sever every relationship, resign in anger, or interpret every inconvenience as a divine warning. Obedience is not the same as impulsiveness, and urgency is not always wisdom. What this moment may expose is the difference between a faithful response and a frightened reaction. You may be asked to tell the truth without trying to control the result. You may be asked to remain quiet instead of defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You may be asked to prepare carefully while nothing visible seems to be moving. You may be asked to forgive without returning to an unhealthy pattern. You may be asked to begin again without pretending the previous chapter did not hurt. The promise is not that every outcome will immediately improve. The promise is that honest obedience can bring your inner life back into alignment with what you already recognize. Before the turn, there may be a decision to make inside your own character. Think of the Saturday scene that has become familiar to you. The week has left its marks on the kitchen counter, the laundry chair, the unanswered message, and the calendar filled with appointments that never touched the deepest issue. You stand beside the sink with both hands under warm water, remembering a conversation in which you said less than you meant because you feared the other person's response. Or you sit in your car outside your home, gathering strength before walking through the door because you do not want to carry the same tension into another evening. The title reaches you there, not in a dramatic sanctuary, But in the place where obedience must become ordinary, God may be asking you to change the way you answer, the way you spend, the way you speak, the way you wait, or the way you protect your peace. The turn may begin with a small refusal to repeat what has been exhausting you. It may begin with one honest sentence and one disciplined pause. You have probably wondered why the message feels personal when you have heard similar words before. It is not because you are better than anyone else, and it is not proof that every impression carries divine authority. Sometimes a theme becomes noticeable because your attention is finally ready to face what busyness kept covered. You see the same conflict more clearly because your excuses have become more tiring than the truth. You notice the cost of postponement in your sleep, your patience, your relationships, and your ability to pray without performing. The hardest part may not be waiting, but not knowing what the waiting means. You may not know whether you are being asked to wait, prepare, close a cycle, redirect your energy, rebuild slowly, or begin again. That uncertainty can make every silence feel like abandonment and every delay feel like rejection. When waiting remains undefined, the heart tries to define it through fear. A quiet phone becomes evidence that you have been forgotten. A closed door becomes proof that you missed your chance. Another person's progress becomes a judgment against your own life. Then pressure enters. And pressure tells you to force what wisdom would ask you to release. You may send the message just to end the uncertainty. You may accept an arrangement that diminishes you just to avoid being alone. You may make a decision in one exhausted night that requires months of repair. This is how false urgency disguises itself as courage. It does not ask what is faithful, it asks what will make the discomfort stop fastest. But the command attached to this Saturday is not escape the feeling at any cost. It is obey the truth you can carry with a clean conscience. There is a difference between moving because you are led and moving because you cannot tolerate stillness. Consider Noah, who worked on what had not yet become visible to everyone around him. His obedience was not validated by immediate applause, and the work itself did not depend on public agreement. You do not need to turn your life into a spectacle to understand the lesson. There are days when your obedience looks like preparing a document nobody has requested yet, keeping a promise nobody is monitoring, resisting a familiar temptation, or choosing patience in a conversation where winning would be easier. Noah's story does not give you permission to label every private idea as a divine assignment. It does remind you that faithful work can look unnecessary before its purpose becomes clear. In your ordinary life, the question may be less dramatic. Can you do what is right without requiring everyone to understand why? Can you keep building character when the visible result is still absent? Can you obey without using the silence as an excuse to abandon what you know is good? Ignoring the signal does not usually create one sudden catastrophe. More often, it creates a quiet cycle. You recognize something, postpone it, feel temporary relief, and then meet the same issue in a new setting. The names change, but the pattern remains. You keep asking for confirmation because confirmation feels safer than responsibility. You call the delay discernment even when you have already made the decision internally. You call the fear wisdom because fear speaks in careful words. Over time, the cost appears in small losses. Peace that does not return, conversations that become colder, opportunities that no longer fit, and a self-respect weakened by repeated self-betrayal. None of this means that every missed opportunity was God's punishment or that every difficult season resulted from disobedience. It means that avoidance has consequences, just as obedience has consequences. A faithful choice may still hurt, but it does not leave you divided against your own conscience. So when you hear that God is asking you for one thing before the turn, do not turn the message into a superstition about a date. Let Saturday become a place of honest attention. If the instruction is to stop reacting, stop long enough to hear yourself without the noise of panic. If it is to speak, prepare your words without rehearsing revenge. If it is to wait, let waiting include preparation rather than passive resentment. If it is to release, do not keep touching the wound to see whether it still controls you. If it is to return to a neglected responsibility, begin with the next measurable action. You can type 888 in the comments as a simple confirmation that you are choosing honest obedience over confusion, and then return to the message. The number does not move anything in the spiritual realm. Your purpose is simply to mark the decision in your own attention. The real confirmation will be found in the steady way you respond when the moment becomes inconvenient. The question beneath your resistance may be deeper than, "What is God asking me to do?" It may be, "Who will I be if I do it?" You may fear becoming less available to people who benefited from your constant availability. You may fear disappointing family members who only recognize the version of you that never says no. You may fear losing an identity built around rescuing, explaining, pleasing, or enduring. Sometimes obedience feels like disobedience to the expectations that shaped you. Your hands may shake as you write a boundary. Your throat may tighten as you admit that you cannot continue. Your mind may produce 10 reasons to return to the old arrangement, not because it was healthy, but because it was familiar. The internal pattern is often this: you wait for peace to arrive before obeying, while peace may begin to grow only after you stop arguing with what is true. Recognition alone is not enough. A person can identify the door and still remain seated in the hallway. This is where the heart needs more than inspiration. It needs a way to examine motives without becoming suspicious of every desire. It needs language for separating conviction from shame, patience from passivity, compassion from self-erasure, and courage from impulsiveness. You can ask yourself what the instruction produces in you. Does it invite honesty, responsibility, humility, and steadiness? Or does it demand panic, superiority, secrecy, and immediate proof? Does the next step respect reality, or does it require you to deny obvious facts? Does it make room for counsel and prayer, or does it isolate you from everyone who might challenge your interpretation? A clear spiritual direction does not need manipulation to survive examination. It can remain meaningful while you move slowly enough to act wisely. Before this Saturday turns into another day, you remember with regret, let the question become concrete. What can you do today that expresses obedience without pretending to control tomorrow? Recognition without direction can leave the heart just as tired as confusion. If you know that you need a practical companion for reflection, prayer, discernment, and daily decisions, the 7 Principles of C.S. Lewis for the Chosen can help you identify the next faithful step without reacting from panic. It can help you examine whether you are waiting, preparing, closing a cycle, rebuilding, or beginning again, while keeping the focus on responsible action rather than guaranteed outcomes. The value is not in treating a book as a spiritual object, but in using its ideas to bring clearer questions into your real life. When you need that kind of application, go now to the top of the comments and click the link in the pinned comment to access the ebook. Then return to your own situation with a calmer mind, because obedience becomes trustworthy when it can be practiced in ordinary details. The instruction may not become easier, but it can become more honest and more specific. Your mind may argue with the message while your body has already revealed the strain. Reason asks for more evidence, more timing, more agreement, and one more conversation before anything changes. Your body responds with a clenched jaw, shallow breathing, restless sleep, and the fatigue of carrying 2 opposing intentions. Your spirit, understood carefully, may be recognizing a moral or relational truth that neither thought nor sensation can resolve alone. A tight chest is not automatically a divine signal, and calmness is not automatic proof that a choice is right. You need the whole person: sound judgment, honest prayer, attention to consequences, and willingness to receive correction. When those elements work together, you become less vulnerable to dramatic interpretations. You can say, "I feel afraid," but fear does not have to decide. You can say, "I want a quick answer," but urgency does not make an answer wise. This Saturday asks for obedience that includes discernment, not obedience that abandons discernment. Your relationships will reveal whether your understanding is becoming mature. If you believe God is asking you to set a limit, the limit should be clear rather than cruel. If you believe you must forgive, forgiveness should not require you to ignore repeated harm or surrender reasonable protection. If you believe you need to apologize, do not attach a demand that the other person immediately respond as you hope. If you believe you should step away from a familiar environment, leave without turning departure into a campaign against everyone who remains. Discernment does not make you suspicious of every person who disappoints you. It makes you more truthful about what you can participate in with integrity. You can love someone and still refuse a pattern. You can bless someone and still close access to your private life. You can remain humble without calling every form of self-neglect holy. Before the turn, obedience may be asking you to put your life in a healthier shape so that your yes means something and your no carries peace. Noise keeps the pattern alive because it gives you endless alternatives to the one necessary response. You can scroll until the feeling becomes dull. You can fill every hour with tasks that look productive but never touch the decision. You can ask 10 people for advice and choose the answer that permits you to remain unchanged. You can wait for an unmistakable sign while ignoring the repeated wisdom already available through scripture, conscience, experience, and trustworthy counsel. Fatigue makes lesser urgencies appear important. A notification demands attention, while a neglected responsibility quietly drains your integrity. The opposition is not always a dramatic force. Sometimes it is simply the accumulation of distractions that prevents you from sitting still long enough to become honest. That is why obedience may begin with a quieter schedule, a shorter response, a phone placed face down, or a morning without immediate noise. You are not trying to manufacture a spiritual experience. You are removing enough clutter to recognize the decision that has been waiting beneath it. There comes a point when negotiation becomes another form of refusal. You have prayed about the same matter, discussed it repeatedly, and explained your reasons for delay so many times that the explanation now protects the fear more than it protects you. The turning point is not an emotional explosion. It is often a sentence spoken privately. "I will not keep bargaining with what I know." You do not need to feel fearless to obey. You need to stop making fear the final authority. This does not mean every inner impression is infallible. It means that once a responsible decision has been examined, once its consequences have been considered, and once its direction remains consistent with truth and love, endless hesitation can become its own kind of bondage. This Saturday, before you imagine a new chapter, honor the instruction that belongs to the present chapter. The turn may be less about what suddenly arrives and more about what you finally stop carrying. Imagine a sealed room with a single window covered by a heavy curtain. The room has stood there for a long time, holding a quiet brightness that nobody outside can measure. The curtain is not proof that the light has disappeared. It only means that what is inside cannot yet be seen from the street. In this image, your obedience is not a performance for people passing by. It is the hand that reaches for the cord and opens what has been closed at the proper moment. The room has walls, a floor, a ceiling, and a window because formation has been taking place within limits. You may have mistaken those limits for abandonment. You may have assumed that because nobody applauded the hidden work, nothing meaningful was happening. Yet a room can become ready in silence, a heart can become honest without witnesses, a decision can mature before it becomes visible. The Saturday instruction is the hand at the curtain, not a promise about what everyone else will see afterward. Inside that room, the quiet work has been exact. Dust has settled, clutter has been moved, and objects that once seemed essential have been placed where they no longer block the window. You have learned to live without immediate explanation. You have discovered which thoughts can remain and which ones only create noise. You have practiced returning to prayer after disappointment instead of using disappointment as evidence against God. The hiddenness has not made you superior. It has made you more aware of your dependence. A room prepared for light does not congratulate itself for being a room. It simply becomes capable of receiving what was already present. In the same way, the waiting may have been forming your capacity to receive instruction without turning it into an excuse for control. You are learning to hold hope without demanding a timetable. You are learning to act without needing the entire path illuminated. The work inside you may be quiet, but quiet does not mean empty. The curtain has also been pulled by habits that keep the room dim. Shame tells you that if the light cannot enter completely, there is no reason to open the window at all. Comparison makes you stare at other windows and conclude that your own room has been overlooked. Resentment piles furniture against the wall because you want the silence to prove that somebody else was wrong. Exhaustion convinces you that preparation is pointless when you cannot see immediate results. These pressures do not need to be treated as supernatural proof. They are recognizable human responses to uncertainty, disappointment, and fear. The important question is what you do with them. Do you leave the curtain closed because the morning is not as bright as you hoped? Do you refuse the next faithful step because it does not reveal the entire future? Or do you open enough space for truth to enter, even if the light first exposes dust you would rather hide? Obedience often reveals what needs cleaning before it reveals what you hope to admire. Then the hand moves slowly and without drama. The curtain opens a few inches and the room does not become perfect. It becomes visible. The chair you feared was broken can be repaired. The papers scattered across the floor can be gathered. The window that seemed sealed only needed patient attention. The movement is small, but it changes the relationship between the inside and the outside. You begin to see that preparation was not punishment, and that restraint was not necessarily rejection. Some delays protected you from acting with motives you had not yet examined. Some closed doors kept you from carrying old patterns into new responsibilities. Some unanswered questions remained unanswered because you were being invited to practice wisdom rather than collect guarantees. As the curtain opens, your task is not to run into the street and explain the room to everyone. Your task is to care for what has become visible and let the light show you the next faithful action. The turn begins with movement, but movement must remain governed by truth. You recognize the image when you realize that the room was never waiting for an audience. It was waiting for readiness. The light did not need your performance, and your obedience did not need public approval. You may have been asking whether the world could see a change, while the deeper question was whether you could faithfully tend what had been entrusted to you. The title's command becomes more grounded here. Before the turn, obey the instruction that opens the window in you. Do not force the curtain open in anger, and do not keep it closed to preserve an old identity. Let the hidden work become visible enough for action, not so visible that you confuse attention with purpose. If this image describes the place where you are standing, type "I am ready" in the comments and return to the message. Those words are not a spell, and they do not guarantee an outcome. They simply give language to a willingness to stop hiding from the next honest step. What matters most is what that willingness produces in your conduct. Now return from the room to your Saturday. Return to the kitchen, the car, the desk, the conversation, and the responsibility waiting in plain sight. The point is not to become fascinated with hiddenness or to call every delay meaningful. The point is to recognize that obedience can be quiet, specific, and measurable. If God is asking you to release something, release the behavior that keeps reopening it. If you are being invited to prepare, prepare with discipline instead of making anxious predictions. If you need to speak, speak without trying to force a particular reaction. If you need to wait, wait actively by strengthening the character and skills required for whatever comes next. The turn is not a guarantee that circumstances will obey your preferred schedule. It is an invitation to let your response become more faithful than your fear. You are not responsible for controlling the entire horizon. You are responsible for the step under your feet. Begin with a morning seal that takes less than a few minutes. Before reaching for your phone, place both feet on the floor and name the instruction you believe deserves attention today. Write it in one plain sentence without dramatic language. Then ask whether it is consistent with truth, love, wisdom, and your actual responsibilities. Notice what your body does when you read it. Do not treat every sensation as revelation, but do not ignore the difference between honest conviction and frantic pressure. After that, choose one action that can be completed before the day becomes crowded. It may be sending a necessary message, cancelling an arrangement that violates your limits, opening the document you have delayed, or setting aside time for a careful conversation. The practice protects you from turning a spiritual insight into vague emotion. You are bringing the instruction out of the clouds and into a real schedule. When evening comes, ask whether your action made you more honest, more peaceful, and more responsible, even if the outcome remains unfinished. Use a threshold pause whenever you are about to repeat the old response. This can happen before answering a difficult text, entering a tense room, making a purchase from distress, or agreeing to something you already resent. Pause long enough to ask 3 questions in your own words. What am I feeling? What am I assuming? What would obedience look like if I did not need immediate relief? The pause is not avoidance. It is a way to keep fear from choosing while you are emotionally flooded. You may discover that the faithful response is a delay, not a declaration. You may discover that you need counsel, not isolation. You may discover that you can say yes freely only after saying no to pressure. In the car before walking into your home, let the pause become a doorway between the person the day demanded and the person you are choosing to be. Small moments of discernment can change the direction of an entire week because they interrupt the automatic pattern before it gains strength. Obedience also includes limits. There are do